Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mastering Rod Building Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Faulkner, and we have a very special guest today that we've been trying to schedule this thing for some time now, and
it's all your fault.
It is actually all my fault, and I literally just bought my guest lunch to try and pay off that. But yeah, we've had to reschedule this in a couple of times. But if you have spent any time in the Northern Gulf Coast, my guest needs zero introduction because he'd never tell you this, but he's a legend down here, and that's Captain Bobby Abruscato. And so Bobby, thank you for joining. Everybody down here in Alabama and from Pensacola to the other side of Mobile know exactly who Bobby is, and if they've had to compete against him in the Alabama Inshore tournament trail or the professional redfish tournament trail, they know who he is too. But for those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting Captain Bobby yet, he's been guiding for 45 years. He's been a professional tournament fisherman for like the last 22, 23 years, with some spots taken off in between, about 17 total years. He's got 19 pro redfish tournament wins. He is the four-time Alabama Inshore trail champion. There is a very unique and difficult Murderers Row tournament down here in the wintertime called the Bog.
Yep.
You and your partner have won 6 of the 8 bogs. It's been dominant. And he's also spent the last 12 years as a rod builder. And so Bobby's kind of special because he was a great friend of Jim Ising's. Many of you know the late, great Jim Ising, we've lost him in January of 2023, I guess. But Jim was the marketing guy here for Anglers Resource in Fuji, North America, for a long time. Great bait designer, great rod builder, and a great guy. And so that's kind of how I met Bobby, and have had the pleasure of fishing with him. Whenever I have people coming down and saying, hey, we're going to be in your area and we want to go fishing, Bobby's on a very short list. Him and his bog partner both on a very short list of people that I always refer people to, and just an all-around great guy and a lights-out angler. So Captain Bobby Abruscato, thank you very much for being here, man.
Thanks for us finally getting together, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and thanks for the lunch.
Yeah,
the
you're
lunch
welcome.
Was fabulous, man.
I think
you bribed me with the lunch.
Yeah, I know. Hey, look, man, I'll bribe you with whatever it takes. That's just the beginning.
It was fun.
Yeah, no, it was fun. I appreciate you making the effort and driving up. So I ask all my guests how they got into fishing, and so tell us a little bit about how you got into fishing in the first place before we talk rod building.
Well, I grew up on Dauphin Island fishing, and my father wasn't from here. He fell in love with the Gulf Coast the very first time he saw it, and built a little house on Dauphin Island that we spent every weekends, every day of summer down there, and just picked up rods and started fishing then. And I was working during the summer, working for a charter operation. The guy had some offshore boats and a little inshore boat. We didn't call them inshore boats then; it was just a center console. But anyway, when the bridge, Dauphin Island Bridge, got blown down in '79 by Hurricane Frederick, he got hired to run a ferry, and so he asked me if I'd be interested. I was working as his hay boy, basically, be interested in taking some of his trips to keep his business going while he had the gig with the other deal. So that's how it started. And I told my father, I was in college when that happened, and I was doing it during the summer, and I told my dad after doing it for a summer, I said, Dad, I'm going to quit college and start guiding full time.
Right.
Well, you can imagine how that went over. He said, you can do whatever you want when you get done, but you're going to finish college.
Yeah.
So anyway, when I graduated from college, like the people I graduated with, we were going to job fairs and interviewing for jobs, and I was getting these offers at less than what I was making cash on the barrelhead as a fishing guide. And I said, well, I'm just going to keep doing this till I find a real job. That was in 1980, and I'm still looking for a real job.
Me too. Me too.
So that's how that all started.
Oh, that's awesome.
Anyway, and I'm now 60, going on 65 years old, and I figure by now nobody wants to hire a burned out redneck fishing guide, so I'm stuck doing what I'm doing till it's over.
Well, there we go.
Yeah,
there we go.
And I tell somebody, you don't ever retire as a fishing guide anyway.
Well, hey, here's the other thing. This is another thing we share. You're a guitar player. You played a band with your brother, a good band. I see y'all are off in the live music at CCA events and stuff. So hey, you can just keep playing guitar and keep fishing. What else do you need?
Well, as you well know, as being a guitar player, man, I'll tell you, the only thing you make less money at than being a fishing guide is a guitar player.
That's right.
Yeah. You want to really go broke? Make it as a guitar player.
Exactly. Start a band, man. You'll be broke and unhappy.
Yeah, the bank doesn't take bar tabs and stuff.
It's a shame. They
yeah,
ought to.
I know,
And
I know.
I'd be wealthy if they did. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, that's right.
I like Hey Boy too. I'm gonna use that. It's fascinating to me as someone who's not from this area, who's been down here for a good part of the last 12 years. So many people that have gone on to be sort of prominent and significant came from Dauphin Island. It's so interesting because it's a small community.
It is.
It was even smaller then. So like the Theories, Butch and his daddy and his brother.
Yeah, that's right.
My buddy Bo Strange. Like I know so many. And for those of you, if you want to look it up, it's not dolphin like porpoise. It's Dauphin, like Dauphin, Dauphin Island, and it's a really cool and unique community. But man, it seems like everybody I know who's from down here is a lights out fisherman's from there. There's something in the water or something. I don't know.
That's got a southwest Mobile County. It's as far south and southwest as you can go in Alabama, and so I guess that's what it is, man.
Yeah. Well, it's working. Whatever it is, y'all, it's
yeah.
working. Y'all don't change it. So, talk to me about how you got into rod building.
Well, it's kind of a funny story. You mentioned Jim Ising, who was my mentor and became a very dear friend.
Me too.
We really got to be really good friends, and anybody that knew Jim
Loved it.
professionally or personally knows what kind of guy he was. He was the most positive. I always tell him he should have been a motivational speaker because he never had anything bad to say.
No, he didn't.
He always was real positive. Well, anyway, Jim had just moved here, and so he emailed me. And at the time, I was thinking about starting to build my own rods because I have a rod sponsor, rod reel line, and everything that takes care of that for me. But I wasn't happy being said, okay, you're going to use this rod.
Right.
Whether you're going to pop and cork fish or top water fish, we'll talk about that a little bit more, I'm sure, in just a minute. But anyway, I said, I think I could probably build the rod to do what I want it to do.
Right.
Well, at the very same time, almost the same time, I get an email from Jim. He says, I'm Jim Ising. I'm the new North American Marketing Director for Fuji, or Anglers Resources. And he said, man, I'd love to meet with you and go fishing sometime. Want to learn a little bit about fishing this area. And I said, well, ironically, I'm thinking about starting to build rods. He said, well, let's talk. So anyway, we met up and then we just hit it off just like, you can't help but hit it off with Jim. He's such a wonderful guy. Well, anyway, he said, so what do you want to do? And I said, I just want to build enough rods for my little charter operation, maybe like a dozen, maybe 2 dozen. He starts shaking his head right away. And the rod builders, everybody that's listening to this right now is going to go like, you can't just build 12 rods. Well, Jim goes, you can't. He said, you're not going to be able to just build 12 or 24 rods. He said, he told me this, I'll never forget this. He said, rod building is like crack. You get hooked on it. And I said, oh no, man.
Well, see, I would have thought Jim was one of the guys I knew was most likely to have never tried crack in his whole life.
Yeah.
Now I know.
He compared it to anyway. He
was right.
He was right.
The truth.
So I said, no, man, I'm going to build, just enough to do, I got a few sets of rods. I think I'm probably, if I'm guessing, probably around 300 rods right now that I've built. Maybe give or take, what I'm saying. So needless to say, he was right. And your audience is I would assume is about 99% rod builder, so they know what I'm talking about. But I build a set. I need to take a little time off, but I'm ready to start building again. With the new points, I'm anxious to try those out. And I don't sell them. I don't build them to sell. I have sold rods, special order rods. I'll get a client that says, "Hey man, it'd really be a lot if you build me an Alabama rod or whatever." And but I build mine for myself to use. And I always tell everybody I can pretty up a rod, not like some of the other rod crafters I've seen can do. I can do some pretty stuff, but I tell everybody I build my rods for, I'll make sure I say this right, I build mine for function, not form. I build mine to catch fish.
Right,
And so Jim,
they're tools.
Yeah, they're tools. And Jim used to tell me, because I got a few white blanks, but almost all my rods are black with black wrap.
Yeah.
He used to call me the Henry Ford rod building.
Hey,
he said,
look.
you only know one color. And I said,
well,
that's all I need, man.
As soon as you stop catching fish on that color, you'll change, right?
Yeah. Well, the other good thing about using black thread, I tell everybody, especially if you're using black guides, is you can't see the gap in the thread.
What gap? Gap? So, what are you talking about? Well, so this is where it gets kind of interesting for me. So obviously I scratched the surface of your credentials. You're an outstanding angler. I also really respect that you always have an eye towards conservation and protecting the fishery. You, like me, are a great enthusiast for artificial lures, right? Nothing against bait, but if all things being equal, you'd rather catch them on artificial and like fishing that way. And so you also kind of are interesting to me when we talk about the guide to building the ultimate inshore rods and everything like that. That's not going to be necessarily one rod, but it can be, right?
Can be,
so you kind of live in this world where you are tournament fishing at an elite winning level, a championship level, and you have rods you build for that use case, for your use only, just for tournaments, then how many days a year are you guiding people?
I got about 200 days a year guide.
So full-time guy,
yeah.
And does a wonderful job with it. Great with kids, great with ladies, great with all levels of experience. Like, I cannot recommend him enough if you come down here for vacation and you want to go fish. And we'll put some information out for how you can get in touch with him. But what you need to put in those folks' hands and the charter is maybe not the same as what you need in your hands when you're fishing. So let's sort of talk about that.
Yep.
So because you have such a unique perspective, you got way more hours on the water than most of us. You are a almost exclusively sort of inshore angler, chasing these trout, redfish, flounder, all these different and other things seasonally. But so like I can hardly think of a better person to sort of have a conversation about the best kind of inshore rod. So I don't know if you want to start at the basic end for, if someone's going on vacation a week a year and they need one rod to kind of do it all, to go to the beach, like maybe we talk about how you think about that, and then we lean into a little bit more of what a lot of our enthusiast rod builder friends want to know, which is the very specific best topwater rod for trout and redfish, the best pop and cork rod, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Walk me through, because we were talking about this at lunch, and you have a really interesting perspective because you get to see both sides of the house, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing you do, I always kind of picture it in my mind just like a little bit of one of those flow charts where you say yes, no, and it keeps going. Mm-hmm. So usually what I do is, well, first of all, let's just say if I'm going to build one for somebody says, hey, will you build me a rod? So the first thing I think any rod builder is going to ask them, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
And or like we joked about, or I don't know if joke or not, but first of all you ask them how much you want to spend, and then you go, what are you going to do with it? And they go like, well, I might jig fish, I might top water fish, I might pop and cork fish, I might slick lure fish or whatever. I'm going to build them 7-foot medium action rod.
Right.
That'll cover everything. It'll be pretty good for everything.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's not going to be real good for this or real good for that, but it'll be good enough to get you through. And so that concept I'll take with the majority of my charter rods. So what I do, ideally I'd love to have Bill and his group, a top water rod for each one of them, a pop and cork rod for each one, a jig rod.
It's just not feasible.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
You can't do it. So because now I'm carrying 30 rods.
And
they break them. Right. So I have to build. So generally speaking, what I do is I'll build, for my charter operation, I build 7-foot medium action, mostly spinning rods.
Yeah.
I have a few clients that'll usually if they're going to bring casting, I tell them to bring their own.
Yeah.
But I still keep some for them. But it's going to be a 7-foot medium action rod because it's going to be pretty good at doing everything I need it to do.
And are there specific blanks you really like?
Well, I usually use like an MHX. The MHX blanks seem to get it done for me as well as anything. They're not, ridiculously expensive, but they're the quality that you can still put in somebody's hand and not be embarrassed.
Sure.
The last thing I want to do is hand a guy a 2-piece rod with a, whatever, and with 4 guides.
Well, it reflects on you as a guide in your business and the experience.
Well, and it kind of gets back to what I was telling Jim. I want to build, what I want it to do, but I want it to be quality too. And so you can accomplish both of that and still, with the right blank and materials, build a rod that'll hold up to 200 days of charter fishing.
Yeah.
And I have rods that'll do that.
Yeah.
My reels do too. And that's another big thing with my reels is the reels that I use on them, I use Penn reels exclusively. And I got reels. I'm still on my Gen 1, the model that I use from Penn. And we're on Gen 2s already coming out. And I still have those in boxes that I ain't put on reels yet because they hold up so well for me.
Yeah.
And my reels get rinsed when it rains.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Yeah,
I don't do a lot of maintenance
coddling
on
your
them.
equipment. Yeah.
So with that said, so that's what I would do is the same thing. I'd build a guy a 7-foot rod, medium action rod, if he's going to just try and do a bunch of stuff with it, or like you mentioned, come down and just going to fish for the weekend or something. That's what I would put in his hands, as well as my charter operation. So I'm kind of done there. That's pretty well covered. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then, if I was going to build, application specific rods, this is where you kind of get into the meat of it.
And is it pretty much 3 applications? I mean, pop and cork, top water, and plastics on a jig head or a weighted hook?
Yeah, or you could probably take the plastics thing and split that off again too, because so like with a pop and cork rod, for example, same with the top water I was talking about a second, but I'm going to use a rod, a medium action 7.6 because I don't worry about with that kind of action. You're not going to feel much of a bite. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? You're not that rod.
It's a visual bite.
That's a visual bite. But you're cork fishing.
Right.
It's a visual. It's a visual strike.
Right.
So the cork, as on my clients, I tell them, I say, guys, throw it out there, pop the cork one time, count to 3. When it goes under, it means you got to fish. I can't make it any more technical than that. That's as complicated as I can make it.
Yeah.
So you're not worried about feeling a bite.
Right, right.
You know, you're watching a cork going under. So the extra length, what it does for me is, particularly when I'm bringing even experienced anglers, but inexperienced anglers, that having that extra length lets them get that bait out away from the
Helps
boat.
casting
It helps
distance,
casting
yeah.
distance. So I'm giving up feel for casting distance.
Yeah.
And I always tell them too, especially because I like to shallow water fish. I spend a lot of my time in fairly shallow water. It's what I like to do. It's what I'm good at, and so I like to do that if I can make that work.
Right.
And the other thing I tell them after when the cork goes there means you got to fish. The other thing I tell them is the one who casts it further is going to catch the most fish.
Yeah.
So by getting that bait out there, they're going to be more successful. So that's what I'm going to do with that.
Yep.
In that particular application, it's a 7/6 medium action. It's a great rod with braided line. It's a soft action rod. So if I get a big trout on, or red for that matter, but that braided line with zero stretch, that soft action of that rod helps keep that hook in the fish.
Yep.
So that's the rod that I'm going to use
Yeah.
for a popping cork
Yeah,
rod.
and again, it's hard to have people explain this until you've spent a lot of time fishing this way, right? But the cork is weighted. You may not have, if you're fishing live bait, too stiff a rod, you're gonna throw your shrimp off all day
That's
long, right?
That's a great point.
And then you're also, as it sounds, you're popping the cork, right?
Yeah.
And too stiff a rod doing that can wear you out, right?
That's two
But
great points.
Yeah. So that action makes perfect sense that it's going to help you be more effective, right? You're
That's
gonna get
right.
great casting distance without, if you're choosing to fish live bait without throwing your shrimp off as often, and also not wearing yourself out popping that thing. If you're trying to pop a cork all day with a broomstick, it's going to wear you out.
It does, and it doesn't do a good job of actually popping. The
No,
cork.
it doesn't.
But that's too. I'm glad you mentioned those 2 points because that's real important from the fishing standpoint. There, is like, especially if you're using bait, throwing them off like that, and that softer action helps keep that on there with less effort of, making the cast.
Now, do you personally favor spinning or casting for your pop and cork rods?
I even on I'm as good as anybody I've ever been on the boat with a casting reel. But even with popping corks, I still use a spinning reel.
Okay.
Because you can't. They're so. I don't know what's the word. Is it word? It's non-aerodynamic.
Yeah, that's a word. Yeah.
Non-aero. So you can't throw a casting reel all day long with a light popping cork in a bait underneath it all day long without turning it inside out a few times.
Right. Yeah.
Spinning rod is just foolproof. And like I said, I'm good with a casting rod, a casting reel, but even my rods, tournament fishing even, I'm still, and that's the only application that I use myself a spinning rod for.
Okay. And you're running braid straight to the cork.
Yep.
And then you're running. Talk to me about leader.
Fluorocarbon leader, generally about 2 feet of fluorocarbon leader between the cork and the lure, and I use a little shrimp imitation and tie that on with a loop knot down there. Anything that I use, not just the shrimp, but any kind of lure, topwater, a slick lure, jig, anything that doesn't have a split ring on it, I tie a loop knot to.
Yep.
So I'd recommend, if you're not doing that, to at least experiment with a loop knot. There's a bunch of different kinds.
There are.
And I don't even know the name of the one that I tie, but it's the one I use.
Right.
And give yourself about 1/4 to maybe 3/8 of an inch of loop, and you'll triple the action of the lure.
Yeah.
Whether it's a sinking lure or a topwater,
Right.
It'll triple the action, which is going to get you more bites.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so
That's a great tip.
I would definitely learn how to tie some sort of loop knot there. And just one step further on the loop knot. Back when I started tying it, I was always worried that was a weak knot. And I was doing a seminar. I mean, not a seminar. I was working at a show. We had a knot tester there.
I love a knot tester.
Yeah, and so I'm going.
You learn some things.
You do. And so people would come by, and we had some line there. I was with Berkeley, and we would test their knots, and so anyway, I had a little break there. I said, I want to check a couple of my knots, and so I did, and I know 5 knots that I can tie blindfolded,
Right.
And so
And thanks to the knot tester, you know how strong that
that's exactly right. Well, I said, I want to check this, and I checked that loop knot, and I was shocked at how well it tested out.
Dude, I tell you, I spent, my son's 20 now, and he's about 10 or 11 years old. And we did this for a science fair experiment. I was trying to find, he didn't want to do it. And I was like, we got to find something fishing related that he's interested in that he'll do.
Yeah.
And we built a homemade line testing machine.
Oh,
and
cool.
we tested the strongest braid to fluoro or mono joins,
Yeah.
right? And I tell you what, I started doing that, and he went all the way to state with that science fair project. It was great, and I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Right? But then I started until I ended up breaking my setup because it actually is a pretty elaborate setup to do it over and over and over and not kink it or damage it or to really test what you're trying to test, whether it's the actual line strength or it's the actual knot strength or strength of any of your components or haywire twists or whatever. But it's amazing how much you learn real quick when you about what you think you know and then what the numbers tell you when you're testing this stuff. It kind of shocks me that more anglers don't do it. We just sort of like, oh, this is a strong knot. I read it was strong. It's like, oh well, it's fascinating that you did that. It's I wish I knew the name of your loop knot now.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, you show it to me afterwards.
It's probably one that just about everybody ties, but it's pretty easy. Like I said, and I've had people go like, well, you need to try this knot. And matter of fact, at that show, just a real quick story on that show, these guys would come up, and you're gonna love this. And you might be a knot junkie, so I'm sorry if I don't want to insult anybody that is a knot junkie, but these guys would come up and they'd go, man, let me show you this knot my papa showed me, and it'd take him 20 minutes to tie the knot, and he'd test it out, and they'd test out like half the line strength, and I'm going,
that's a lose-lose.
Yeah, you're spending 20. I was snapper fishing with a guy not long ago. He said, let me show you this, I don't even know how to tie one, but I've seen the FG knot.
Yeah.
He talks about, that ain't an easy knot to tie. So this guy, we're out catching snapper, and he says, oh, I'm going to show you this FG knot. So, of course, it takes him 10 minutes to tie it, and he goes to pull on it, and it comes loose. In the meantime, I've caught my 2 snappers.
Right.
So I've got my limit while he's tying his knot.
Yeah, you keep tying.
The moral of the story is the best knot in the world is the one you can tie fast that doesn't come untied.
Yeah,
That's the best knot
in a pitching boat in combat conditions.
And flies biting you on the legs.
Or at night.
Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so that's the pop and cork, the 7.6 kind of medium heavy. You talked about. Well, let's go ahead and knock out the top water because that's a good one. So for trout, redfish, throwing a lot of top waters, it's my favorite bite in the world. Yep. It's like when it's on, it's so good. But talk to me about that one. So is that a spinning rod or a casting rod?
Well, it can be both. It could be either. And I build if I'm, I build some spinning rods if I have some clients like during the fall or the spring when the top water bites real good, or we're doing our wade fishing. I'll go ahead and because I know what I'm gonna put in their hand there.
Yeah.
And here again, you can make that rod work for anything, but I'm using a 7.3 medium heavy fast for that for me. And the reason there is like the fast tip. Here again, like with the pop and cork deal with the top water bite, it's a visual strike.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You're not worried about feel, especially a trout bite. You've seen a trout bite. It's you can't miss it. You know what I'm saying?
It's glorious.
If you don't see it, you can hear it. You
know
what I'm saying?
It's glorious.
It's massive. So you're not worried about that. But what I'm doing is I want that. I don't need to feel that. So that fast tip being a little bit soft, I give up a little bit of feel here too. But I also want that softness of that rod with the top water, because as you've seen with the top water, half the fish you hook are
especially
in their
trout.
head or in their, they're never hooked real well. So I want the soft action with that.
And that trout's mouth is so soft. It's so easy to pull them right at both sides when they're doing the head shaking and that one.
And that's the first thing they're going to do when they get on the surface like that is they're trying to throw that. So that soft action makes it a lot more forgiving.
I think it's easier to walk the dog with a slightly softer action. It's almost like it slows you down, and that's why I favor the casting in this situation. Is I just find it more difficult to walk the dog with a spinning reel than a casting reel. I don't know why.
I can't do it. But the guy Richard, the guy that I fish in tournaments with, he's exactly the opposite. He can throw a casting reel as well as I can, but he can't work a top water with a casting reel. He's all spinning. I know it.
He's the one.
He's
the one.
And so when I go, like if I have a client with me and I'm going to top water fish, I'll make the first cast for him. I'll say, hey, let me show you how I want you to work this. And so I start trying to work it with the spinning rod. I'm going, you know what, never mind. Here, you start working it, because I can't do it with a spinning rod. I'm the same way.
Well, since you brought him up, you brought up Richard's name. We'll talk about Richard for a second. So Richard Rutland, you guys are the murderers row of the bog tournament team. It's there ought to be some, I don't know, some fair competition law that prohibits you two guys from being in the boat together.
Don't say that.
No, seriously.
About that.
Oh, golly. But you guys are a dynasty with a capital D for sure when it comes to the bogs. But Richard's a great captain, great fisherman, good rod builder. But I'm mad at him and I'm mad at y'all because I don't even know how much money it's cost me because he turned me on to the slick lure.
Oh,
Slick
gosh,
Junior.
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Which is the Jim Ising thing too.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
So
Yeah.
Jim helped design this lure
Yep.
originally, and then Pure Flats bought it. So Scott Corley and Greg Sample and great guys and
Great
former
guy.
Coca-Cola executives, and they just do a great job with it. But this lure was like, and you started it with Jim.
I want to tell you.
Tell me a
I
story
got to
about
tell a
this
little story.
I'm mad as
Jim
hell
Ising-
at you and Richard, and God forbid
Yeah.
my wife ever sells all my stuff at what I told her I paid for it. Like you've been in my office. I got a wall of
Oh,
slick
yeah,
lures.
yeah.
I can't sleep at night if I'm afraid I don't have enough of every size and every color that I need, because I just one of those baits, and I've showed it to people and they're like, well, it kind of looks like a Paul Brown. It kind of looks like a this, or I don't think a ball tail's gonna do anything. It's like, dude, just fish it.
Yeah.
It's some lures, and they're all designed to catch fishermen, I guess. But some lures just always produce, and they always seem to produce your biggest fish.
Yeah.
That has been that lure for me, and I look at it in the water, and it doesn't look that remarkable. But man, that thing performs. So tell me your slick lure story.
So
Because you were like ground floor with slick
Oh, I
lure.
was.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. So Jim fished with me, and I was. This is, I don't know when it was, 10, 8, 10, 9, 10, whatever it was. So he fishes with me, and Jim always brought his tackle box, of course, his own rods. And
Yeah.
so he left that day, and he had this baggie of these lures in it. Didn't have a name on it, like,
Right.
no a card or anything. It was just a
Right.
baggie of these soft lures. Well, anyway, he left them on the boat, and so we didn't even fish them that day. I was used throwing mirror lures, which I grew up fishing. The regular, 52, 51, 52 series sinking mirror lure.
Dude, it's 18 MR18 for me.
Yeah,
Heavy Dean.
yeah.
Son.
So anyway, the next day I have a charter fishing the same river, and so I get done with the charter, and it's a beautiful day. This is November, December, whatever. And so I finish up, clean their fish, and I said, that's too nice a day to go in. So there's a restaurant down at the other end of the river from where I pick up my clients. I said, I'm gonna fish my way back down there, eat lunch, and then come back. It's just too nice a day.
Yeah.
So I'm fishing down the river with my mirror lure, and wasn't catching anything to amount to anything. And I don't know if I broke off or what, but I opened up my hatch, and there's this bag of these lures sitting there. And so I said, damn, I'm going to put one of those on.
Right.
And so I put one on, and maybe first, second cast, boom, I catch a fish, and it's a nice trout. Next cast, catch a nice trout. Next cast, catch a nice trout. So I'm on them again. So I pick up my mirror lure. 10 casts later, don't get a bite.
Richard has a similar story, right? There's something about that bait. I would say there's normally something about the mirror lure, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's a tough day confidence I go to bait, you know what I mean? Like I'm guilty of almost always throwing the top water first. I don't care whether they're supposed to hit or not, but just in case. And they let you know if they're going to do it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And then the next thing you pick up for me is often the mirror lure, the 18 MR18, and or the chartreuse one. Like I can't tell you how many fish I've caught on that bait over the years. And I have confidence probably matters,
but absolutely, because you'll throw it more even when you're not getting bit.
Right, and there's other baits that are similar, and I've caught some fish on like the Rapala twitching mullet and some that are similar, but man, that bait works for me. And the only thing I ever do to it is sometimes I'll swap. If there's gonna be a bunch of ladyfish and stuff, or if I'm waiting, I like to swap out the trebles for a single, just to make it a little bit easier to handle, and I don't feel like I'm losing any fish. But if you've hung a ladyfish on yourself with treble hooks while waiting, trying to unhook that damn thing before, you know what I'm talking about. A little bit of that goes a long way, and the single hooks make the world a little simpler. But we went out, and actually, this is funny. It was Jim and I went fishing with Richard and Butch Theory, and it was to close out the flounder tagging session that Dylan Keene, this PhD candidate, Dr. Dormat, was doing through the University of South Alabama, this important flounder and fish tagging research. And we got on the boat and caught all our keeper flounder on the slick, the full size slick that day. And it's then we went out and Jim put on a clinic. Absolutely, I don't even remember. Butch or Richard might remember, but we caught something like 8 redfish, and Jim caught 7 of them.
Oh boy, yeah.
Or 6 of them. I think
I can hear that. Man.
Richard was unhappy.
Oh yeah.
And
it's never wise to outfish the guy.
No, Richard, I love you. Yeah, and Richard's one who when the boat's coming off plane, he'll hop up there to make the first cast faster than some captains will when he's got people in the boat. But man, Jim, and finally. And it was when Jim was already sick, and it was kind of one of the first days he'd been out in a while, and he was tired, and we had said, Jim, anytime you want to call it, let's go in. We can go in, and we stayed close to where we could get back in the truck quick if we need to on purpose. And finally he was tired, and he's like, you want this redfish? And I took it, and boy, that ended up being the very last day that Jim fished.
Is that right?
And we got some wonderful photos.
Yeah.
And it's such a dear memory to me and to Richard and to Butch that we got to be in the boat with him. But man, I was like, well, he's tired. He's going to be gracious, whatever. We had not even, we had to go to Gelato Joe's for a late lunch after, right? His favorite spot. And man, we had not hardly sat down when he started making I never really pictured you as the kind of person that needed to have his fish hooked and handed to him, and I mean, he wore me
That's
out.
my boy.
No, he just slayed me with that. But it was crazy, and that was a very interesting deal. The details that matter. Everyone had brought their own gear on that trip, and we were all throwing braid to a fluoro leader, and Jim had one casting reel spooled up with just straight, 14 or 16 pound fluoro, and we were fishing the current, ripping through the bridge over by, it's not the Dauphin Island bridge, what is it? Anyway, this bridge, and I don't know if it was making the lure behave differently, if he was fishing a different depth because of the diameter of that line, or deeper or shallower, who knows. But he could not catch them, and we could not catch them, and it was and we were getting hung on all this stuff. And Jim's like, I don't know what you're all doing. You just cast it out like this, and you let it sit there like this, and oh, there's another one. I mean, he was merciless, and I'm so glad that got to be his. I hate that ended up being his swan song, but he went out on top for sure. So the plastics, we're talking about the slick, and if you haven't. Pureflats.com, check it out. It's the Slick Junior, and the Little Slick. It was a chartreuse or lime truce or something. What is it? Little Slick that day that he wore us out on the redfish. Set that on, and that's how I got to know the guys at Pure Flats, because Richard had these great big old bags of them in his boat, and I went to go buy this lure. I mean, I walked off the boat, and as soon as I had cell reception, I was ordering this lure, holy cow, I got some big flounder on this lure, and it came in bags of 5 or 6, and so I called him and I was like, hey man, I want to buy these in bulk, will you sell them to me in 25 or 100? And Greg Sample called me, and we're friends, and he's building rods, and it's and it's cost me a fortune, but it's all you and Richard and Jim's fault. So.
Well, that's the way it all started. I'll tell you, it was amazing.
It's a great lure, man.
Yeah.
But so to that end, we've kind of talked about popping corks. We've kind of talked about, the top waters. Another technique we're using all the time down here is throwing plastics, right? Either on a jig head or on some form of hook. So talk to me about those. You mentioned earlier that you could almost kind of split that into a couple of categories. Talk me through that a little bit.
Well, kind of let me go back a little bit to the top water. So my slick lure rod is also my top water rod.
Oh, is it?
For the same thing we were just talking about.
7.3?
7.3 medium heavy extra fast is what I like, or fast, but as long as it's got a softer tip.
Is there a specific blank you like for that?
Points.
I use the point blank for that. Okay,
absolutely.
I like that.
I love them. I absolutely love them. Jim turned them on to me. We tried some of the original ones, and that's my rod.
Yeah.
But even when I'm not using it, when I'm on a charter or something else, that's still the action I'm going to go to. Is a little bit longer than a 7 with a soft tip.
Right.
And so my top water. So getting to what I'd call it, you mentioned it's plastic. I call it a jig rod, but it's soft plastic with a lead head on it. There I'm going to go just to a 7-foot medium action rod because I want to feel the bite there. That's the application. That slick lure we're talking about, and I mentioned the soft tip, the top water being a visual strike, and you don't have to worry about feeling it. You've gotten the bites with the slick lure, you don't have to feel it either. Oh dude, it is unmistakable. Yeah. I might get in trouble, you might have to edit this out, but I tell the people with the slick, the first time they've ever used it, they say, how will I know I got a bite? And I said, well, it's like an orgasm. When you have one, I can promise you. It is an unmistakable bite.
They smoke it.
They smoke it. So, but this one gets to my weakness. I'm real good with those type of lures. I can
attest to that. Yeah.
Well, I'm not real good.
You got a bunch of bog championships that prove that.
I'm not a good jig fisherman, so I need all the help I can get as far as feeling the bite. So I like a medium. I just straight medium, not medium heavy, but just a straight medium action rod for my jig rods, and that gives me enough feel with. And I use straight fluorocarbon. Like we were talking about with Jim. Straight
Jim does. Yeah, that's probably why Jim was using it. He learned it from me.
Well, I swear by it because it sinks. And
what pound test do you like?
the fluorocarbon I'm using, which is Berkeley professional grade fluorocarbon, is I started with 12. This stuff is so strong. You can go down to 10.
Wow.
You can go down to 10, and I
you get those
challenge
slick
you.
a long way
Oh,
on
dude,
10-pound.
because you take like my tournament rods, titanium torzite inserts.
Yeah.
And the coefficient of friction is so low on the
Easy for you to
guides.
say.
Yeah, the coefficient of friction is so low on the guides, and the fluorocarbon. You got two things. That stuff is slick.
Yep.
And you talk about being able to zing it out there, dude. That thing will move.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing and my jig rod. The same thing is I want that line sinking. If you got to kind of picture this a little bit, if you're throwing a jig, making a long cast with it. Yeah, the jig's going straight down. Well, if you picture your line, if it floats like mono or braid does, you've got this big bow in your line as that lure sinking. Fluorocarbon's going to stay in touch with the jig a lot better. So
and has less stretch than mono, so it's more sensitive than mono.
Yeah, it has more stretch than braid, but considerably less than mono.
Considerably less.
And so, just real quickly on the slick lure thing, when people are starting with that, they'll come to me if I'm at a store or a seminar or just at the dock and say, hey, I've got this slick lure and I just can't catch a fish on it. The first thing I asked him was, what do you use? Monofilament. I said, you're never going to catch them. You'll never catch those fish unless you're using with a slick lure, fluorocarbon or braid, because of the stretch. It's such a big lure with such a big hook. You've got to get that hook out, and you'll never do that with mono. So same way with so you mentioned the stretch. You're looking at about, depending on the fluorocarbon, you're using about 10% stretch. Braid has 0. So if you move the tip 1 inch, braid, the hook's going to move 1 inch.
1 inch,
Fluorocarbon, not a little bit, not as much, but mono's got, depending on what you're using, sometimes 30. 30. So you're trying to set the hook with a rubber band. Now, if you're topwater fishing, that's great, because I was going
to ask, do you use mono on
I use mono on top
for your top
mono on my top waters because of the stretch. So usually I'll ask, if I'm doing a seminar, I'll say, okay, raise your hand if you've caught a fish on a topwater lure, and half the people raise their hand. Like I say, you put them all down, because nobody's ever caught a fish on the topwater. They have to catch themselves. You'll never catch a fish. They have to catch themselves, which goes back to the fish being all hooked in the face and the head. Particularly redfish.
I was just gonna say I love to fish in Venice with my buddy Captain Patrick Dickinson, Dixie Outfitters. He's a great fisherman, and that's dirty water down there. And it's covered up in. We've got more trout than redfish. Seems like here the ratio is kind of reversed down there. There's redfish everywhere. And that's kind of what I do, is I try to have discipline to have one rod rigged with top water, and every spot we hit, I'm going to throw 5 to 10 casts of that top water. And the number of times, it feels funny to be like excited and have the whole boat excited about a fish you don't catch. But the number of times those big reds, I'm talking about, bulls over, 35, 40 inch fish will just come up and they can't quite get it. You know what I mean? They can't quite get their mouth around it.
But it doesn't stop them from trying.
No, and they'll maul it, and they'll knock it in the air, and they'll do all this stuff. And you can have a fish. I mean, I could be working a fish the length of this table he's hitting, and I don't hook him, and everyone's watching it. Ooh, it's an exciting moment, but they have a hard time getting their mouth around it.
They do. They have to go over the top.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. So that's again, so that kind of gets back to having that softer tip and the mono on there, so you got all of that working in your favor when the fish is doing all this stuff, and he may not be hooked the way you want him to hook.
You know, the other thing that has helped me, and I'm not trying to pitch a specific bait, I love a walk. Like, you give me my choice, I'm going to throw a walk the dog style top water. I don't know if it's because I like that I can vary the cadence and the action. I don't know if it's just because it's confidence, but I just believe in that bait so much. But those redfish, man, my hookup ratio, if I go to like a Whopper Plopper, or a Berkeley Chopo, one of those plug style buzz kind of baits, they rarely miss that.
Is that right?
Those big redfish rarely miss it. I don't feel like I get as many bites, but I think I catch as many or more fish. And the only thing with those, they're a jack magnet too. And if you're a beach guy and an open water guy like we are here, you would never believe you'd be in this marsh and those jack crevalle will be in there. But dude, they are in there tearing it up. It's
crazy. Love those things, huh?
God, they'll destroy them. I mean, we'll be sitting there catching trout in a little bay, and we just caught a flounder, and then a 6-foot black tip will destroy your El Chapo, And like, where the hell did that thing come from? It's 3 feet of water for like 5 miles around, but they're in there, and the jacks are in there, and they'll destroy a plug. But anyway, so you're using. And tell us, help people understand what weight jig heads you're typically fishing.
Well, I use I myself, again, getting back to because I'm a terrible jig fisherman, I use 3/8 ounce, which is, some people might go, that's kind of heavy. Most of the time with the charters, I'm putting an eighth, possibly a 1/4 ounce jig head on theirs.
Yeah.
And I'm using a 3/8 just because I'm so bad about fishing too fast and getting out of touch with the bottom. And that makes me, or helps me stay in touch with the bottom.
It keeps you down.
So the jig heads I carry are eighth, 1/4, and 3/8. And then as far as the eighth and the 1/4 go, it just kind of depends on the wind situation, the water depth, that sort of thing, as to which one of those two I'm going to go to. But for them, and again, they're mostly used to spinning tackle.
Yeah.
So they can go to a little bit lighter jig head too.
Yeah.
So those are the only 3 sizes jig heads that I really carry, unless I go like bull red fishing or something, and I'm fishing out in a heavy current at the lighthouse or Dixie Bar somewhere.
You might have to
I might go to a
heavier.
half. Yeah, I'll go to a half, because there it's not finesse fishing. You're trying to cover as much water as you can. You don't worry about the lure sinking. Yeah, those bulls out there are king of the jungle.
Oh yeah.
You don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about them being afraid of anything or whatever. Whatever gets in their way, you're not going to spook them.
Yeah.
And like you said, even with on the top waters, I mean, they'll hit it all the way up to the boat. They ain't afraid when they get ready to eat.
Yeah.
So so that's what I'm using as far as jig head goes. And then with the charters, I fish almost exclusively braid on their spinning reels with a fluorocarbon leader tied to the jig head.
Right.
And sometimes I'll go ahead and put a fluorocarbon leader to the cork, and then from the cork down. And the reason I do that is that way, if I want to cut that off and put a top water on or a jig on,
One step.
Yeah. I don't have to put the whole new, or put a leader on. So I kind of have it ready to go. Yeah. If I know I'm almost certain we're going to be cork fishing all day, I'll just go straight braid to the cork. Obviously, it doesn't matter because they're not seeing that, So and then from fluorocarbon on down like that. So that's basically the 3 rod actions that I use right there, and that covers everything we're really 4 counting the just a straight medium action. Rods.
Well, I'm always fascinated when I get to talk to someone who's got as much experience as you. So talk to me about, you talked about the straight fluorocarbon you like when you're fishing the slicks on a casting reel with straight fluorocarbon. What about when you're running fluorocarbon leader under the cork or tying to fluorocarbon? You using that same Berkeley, or are you using a different fluoro?
I use the same. It's there. I'm going to leader material.
Yeah.
This is just This is actual castable fluorocarbon where.
Less stiff.
Yeah. Whereas the leader material comes on a 100-yard spool or whatever, and it's made to be a leader.
So you're using the Berkeley leader.
Same, but it's Berkeley fluorocarbon.
But the leader stuff, not the real spool kind of fishing line stuff. Yeah. Right. And what do you like for braid?
I've just started in the last year. Berkeley, which is my line sponsor, is just came out with their X5, which is a real light braid, and so I've started using that. I'm so far so good on it, but prior to that I was using their what's called Nanofill, which is it's the most castable line.
I wish they made it in big spools and more colors and sizes, man.
Well, and so I use that's what's still on a lot of my reels, and I still have spools of that, and I love that. I'm probably going to get killed by the pure fishing people, but there's a rumor that it may be coming back. They had discontinued it, but at the dismay of a lot of people like myself.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's put some pressure on Berkeley. Bring it back. Pure fishing, you better bring it back.
Yeah. But so I've been using Nanofill, and I'll continue to use it till I run out of it. But the X5, I've started putting it on a couple of my reels. I don't want to put it on the charter reels. The big thing with me, castability, probably first. Second thing is manageability. Yeah. I don't want wind knots.
Right.
Wind knots are a nightmare. If you're on a boat with, boat full of people, and you start getting wind knots in every reel, and, so
you're out of the action.
You're out of the action. Yeah. Because we talked about backlashes a little while ago, and you were talking about the light tackle fishing you're using.
Yeah.
But a wind knot will make a backlash look good.
Oh, yeah.
You're generally done when you get a wind knot in a
if the chapstick trick doesn't work, then you're done.
Yeah, you're done. So I'm using, those are the 2 that I use. And then when I was tournament red fishing, I used spider wire ultra cast in 30-pound, because I was fishing. A lot of our divisional tournaments were in Louisiana, and as you just mentioned, it ain't finesse fishing down there. You're down
dirty
there,
water,
dirty
a lot of structure.
Yeah, and plus we had to keep our fish alive.
Right.
So you didn't want a 20-minute fight on
the
fish.
You get them in a boat.
In the live well and resuscitating them. You don't want them exhausted.
Right.
So we would just man them in, and even in that case, when I finished up, I was using points in 7-foot action, medium because we were doing a lot of sight casting, so I didn't want a big long rod.
Right.
And I was moving the reel seat. Typically, when I build one of my wade fishing rods, I'll put the reel seat about 10 or 11 inches from the butt, which is fairly close. Mm-hmm. But I was moving those up to about 14 inches from the butt because I wasn't worried about cast. A lot of my casts were flips, and I wanted more accuracy.
That sight fish.
That's exactly, because I'm making, 20-foot, 30-foot, 40-foot casts a lot of times. So I would move that, and that, getting to like the rod building, that was another reason that I really liked, because up until I started building my own rods, I pretty much only used solid grips.
Right.
And so by taking that split grip now, you can move that reel around on the rod wherever you want to get it to do what you want it to do, So like my wade fishing rods, I want a real short butt, because if I get up to, I'm probably going to have to edit this out too, but deep water, I don't want that butt hitting the water when I'm working a top water lure or something like that. And here again, I'm usually throwing either a top water when I'm wading, either top water or slick. Again, by moving this reel down, I'm losing some feel. But with those lures, again, you're not worrying about feel, So
and even if you change the balance, if it's a tip down kind of presentation anyway, who cares, right?
Right.
A lot of kayak guys do the same thing. Both wading, English, and kayak guys shorten that butt a little bit because it just makes it a little easier to manage in this congested space in your lap, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's what's going on. So that was another reason that one of the other kind of tangential reasons that I got into do it, to be able to do those kind of things.
Yeah, you never find on a factory rod. You can make it exactly like you want.
Yeah, that's it. Right. You're going to get this rod. It's going to have a 14-inch solid grip. So your reel seat's up there at 14 or 15 inches. Or so, and so whereas this one you can move around and play around with it and get the action you want, or just subtly change the action of the rod.
Absolutely.
But doing what you want it to do. So that's been a great thing for me. Being able to do what I want to do with it.
It's a great reason to be able to be a custom builder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think people sometimes, there's all kinds of people out there that want something a little bit different than what's on the rack, and that's, you can tap into all that if you want to sell rods, if you're a builder, right?
Yeah.
Like people that have larger or smaller than average hands, people that are taller and shorter than normal, people that are doing real specific fishing applications, whether it's wading, kayaking, pitching to sight fish, whatever it is. I think it's an undervalued aspect of custom rod building. Sometimes people think, I can pick the colors and I can pick what the frame finish on the guides is and whatever. Yeah, you can, but you can also functionally do some things that even on a black on black on black rod makes a difference when it comes to winning tournaments and putting that one better fish in the boat, or not losing that fish, or whatever it is. And it's that extra bit of casting distance over a tournament weekend, that adds up. If you're casting 10 feet further than everybody else, it's the same as you tell your people with the corks. You're going to catch more fish because you're just... If you do the math on it, you're covering so much more water over time, right?
Yep. And so that's, you kind of bring up the main point of the whole deal of rod craft and the rod building is that can, it's not just the fact. Let me just say something real quick too. I remember when I first started building rods, I couldn't wait to fish with the rod I just fished.
Right.
I just could not wait.
Yeah.
And this is and there's going to be some rod builders that fish that are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Is you go out there and I'm going like, I'll cast out there and I'll hook a fish, and I don't even care about the fish. I'm going looking, is that line following? Look how well the rod's been. Oh, I did. And the fish is out here fighting,
Right,
You know what I'm saying? So,
I do know what you're saying.
Yeah, and so you get the fish and go like, oh man, my rod worked exactly like I wanted it to. So getting back to your original point on that is, it does make a difference.
Yeah.
So you're not just saying, hey, it's a pride thing. I built this rod, which I'm proud of.
Right.
The fact is, I can take this thing from a functionality standpoint, and it's going to help me catch.
Yep.
It's going to help me catch more fish because I cast it further, or I felt the fish better, or I worked the lure better, or whatever, or I was able to wade a little bit deeper, or whatever, So there's a lot of function to it. That's what I got into it for. Even though I still am proud, like if I build somebody an Alabama rod or an almond rod or whatever it happens to be, that's kind of nice when I hand it to them there. But mine aren't that. But mine
Well, hey, we live in a state where you can sell an awful lot of rods. You're willing to make them in Auburn, Alabama colors.
Exactly, you better believe it.
But maybe it's been a little more crimson and white than orange and blue these last couple of years. But it's a thing in the state of Alabama for sure.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, so we will get all these different models and put some links up, and I'll nail Captain Bobby down on these specific models, and we'll put them in the description of the podcast so you guys have these links. And again, I can't tell you, I could not possibly overemphasize, if you get a chance to get down here and you want to go fishing with somebody, and I have had people ask me, because I will go a lot of places to fish, and I've been fishing my whole life, and I'm in the fishing business, and I'm a custom rod builder and everything else. But I always go with a guide or a captain, and people say, "Why do you do that? You know what you're doing. You don't need to." It's like, yeah, but if you learn one thing, one loop knot, one handle dimension thing, one using straight fluoro instead of braid to fluoro, if you pick up one thing from everybody you fish with, everybody knows something, nobody knows everything, right? Like, if you want to go fish with someone you can learn a lot from, and I can't tell you how humble Bobby is, but he's a really fun guy to fish with. Like I said, great with kids and families, great with inexperienced fishermen, and I guarantee you are not too experienced to not go learn something and have a good day on this man's boat, I promise. But if people want to get in touch with you, and I highly recommend it if they're coming down here to the northern Gulf Coast, or what we call UCLA, the undiscovered corner of lower Alabama. Like, how's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
It's by far the easiest is just on our website, which is A-Team, like the old it's all one word, A-Team Fishing. The old Mr. T show, ateamfishing.com.
That's right.
And it's got our it's got a way to send a form in through the email to us, and it's got our phone number if you do it the old-fashioned way.
So does that mean you're Hannibal and Richard Rutland is Murdoch, or is Face, or who is he?
Yeah, I think I'm going to make him more like the Face guy, and then most of the time, because he pisses me off a lot of times, I turn into Mr. T. So,
okay, all right. Well, look, I'm gonna leave that to y'all. I can't.
I'm Hannibal. I'm Hannibal until we get out of the water. I'm the one with the plan until we get out of the water.
Right. Hey, somebody's got to have a plan.
Yeah,
man.
that's right.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Well,
this is so much fun, and I
well,
learned some things like I always do when I get to talk to you or go fish with you, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And you guys look Captain Bobby up, and we'll post some links to some of these blanks and things that he's talking about. If you got questions, you can just let us know. But, man, thanks so good to see you.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I'll tell you, it's amazing. You told me when we were first getting started, we're going to kind of shoot for about an hour, and I just kind of glancing at the clock, and we cleared that
with
easily.
Ease. Oh, yeah. And we can keep going.
Keep going, yeah. You forget you're on the air, but I tell everybody it's my second favorite thing to talk about,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, look, we have to have you come back and do a Jim Ising memorial episode and tell some stories about Jim, because I know you got him.
We had some fun together and had some really memorable trips.
He loved fishing with you. I feel like anytime he was flaunting photos, you and him, God, you guys had a trip. Right when I was starting here, it was you and him and Bernie.
Oh man,
Schultz.
Yeah,
and y'all went wading and throwing topwaters at big trout or something. Yeah, and y'all had a morning. Man.
Had a morning. Butch was with us that morning, and
was he? Okay.
Yeah, and Butch Theory, who hosts the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report.
I was trying to dove hunt with him yesterday, but we got
y'all did more wade. You did more wade fishing than you did
more wade fishing than dove hunting. Our life rafts deployed automatically based on water levels.
You had to have a life jacket, but we went, and Butch had just started getting into inshore fishing with us, and I'll make this a very short story.
And Butch is no kind of amateur fisherman.
Oh no, by no means.
He made it and deckhanded on offshore boats his whole life.
He was born on a boat.
Yeah,
he was born as a deckhand.
Literally.
But anyway, and he kept talking about how bad a topwater fisherman he was. And so that morning we went out there. Everybody caught some nice fish, but he outfished everybody noticeably, and had been whining the whole time. I don't know how to topwater fish. He outfished a 9-time Bassmaster Classic qualifier, a full-time 40-year fishing guide.
Right.
A guy's been fishing his whole life. He outfished all of us combined. And I said, I don't want to hear that crap anymore.
You know what? I'm impressed because I know Butch pretty well, and he's never brought it up. Man,
he's that kind of guy.
If I outfish you three, I'd be like, my mom would be like, I know, stop calling me. I'd tell everybody who'd listen, man.
He definitely did.
That's fast company right there when it comes to fishing.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We had some good times. We had, you're just making me. I'm not going to tell them. We'll save that for the next episode or whenever you want. Yeah. Because I keep thinking about all these other stories. I keep thinking about the first time me and Jim went fishing, too, and we had a bang up day, and I won't tell. I want to save the whole story, but at the end of it, all I heard about all day, we caught trout and redfish all day, and we were wrapping it up, and he'd been talking about all day wanting to catch I still call them blackfish, triple tail.
Ooh.
And he was idling my boat, and I was putting stuff up, and he was driving the boat, and he was doing something with my GPS, and we're idling along. I look, and down, there's a piece of bamboo that's not much bigger than a pencil floating, and there's a 26-pound blackfish floating underneath it. I said, Jim, shut the engine off. And he throws out and catches his first and only blackfish, 26 pounds. We waited on his boca. That's the kind of. I said, you have got to be the luckiest guy.
That is, you talk about lanyap on a end of an already good day.
And it was already a good day. And we, somehow or another, I think we were still having we still had a newspaper in Mobile. And so I think I sent a picture of it in, and it made the newspaper where he
That's
sold
a dinosaur, man. That's a hammer. Yeah.
So anyway, that was the way a wonderful trip prior to that even ended. So I said, I told him, and he goes like, man, this fishery's incredible. I said, we had the day of a lifetime.
Yeah. It ain't gonna be like this every day.
Every time, so.
Well, my mom, we've been catching fish and eating fish my whole life, and we were talking about scamp at one point before we got started. I'm pretty partial to scamp. That's pretty good.
Hard not to be.
And I like some real fresh yellowfin tuna too. Like if you most days you let me, yellowmouth grouper or a scamp or some red meat from one of these yellowfin tuna is probably what I'd pick. But we were down in Venice this May and caught some big triple tail blackfish, and it was quite accidental. They were somewhere they weren't supposed to be, in the marsh where they're not normally because of water conditions and something. It's like, this is weird, but it was, we got the radio call. They were there. We were able to go out and get a few, right? And man, it was, we always go down and fish with Captain Patrick Dickinson, this Dixie Outfitters LLC, and the week before Mother's Day. And so we go home on Saturday, and then my brother I take my wife out. She likes to go out for Mother's Day. But my brother always has my mom over and cooks for him, my mom and his wife, for Mother's Day. And man, my mom texted me. He cooked him that black and some triple tail, and she texted me immediately and was like, "Y'all need to quit messing around with this trout and redfish and flounder and go get some of this triple tail, whatever this is. How have I been missing this my whole life?" And I was like, "Damn, Mom!" Like I don't get that reaction out of her very often. She's normally just like, "Thank you for the fish. It was delicious." But the blackfish, she was like, "We need to get us some more. Y'all need to get a trip going for that." Yeah. So, and of course, we tried. We were going to go with the Patrick Garmison and got weathered out when my brother was down here earlier in the summer. But anyway, yeah, that's, if you're going to call up your box with one last fish at the end of the day, inshore fishing, that's pretty hard to. I've
not even gotten close to catching one that big myself, and his first one was that. So.
Well, it couldn't have happened to a nicer.
Oh yeah, and I was tickled for him too. Believe me, I was,
It's so fun on a tiny little piece of bamboo.
It was like about the size of a pin, literally the diameter and the length. So I tell everybody, you'd be surprised the things you'll see those things under. It's not just a big old piece of plywood. No, it's amazing. Just as long as they get their eyes out of it, I guess they'll be up underneath it.
The biggest mahi I ever caught in my life came off half a porta potty door, about 100 miles out of Venice. And captain's moving at Capt Eddie Burgers, fish finish charters, going over there to look at it. It's like, what are we doing? He's like, oh, well, we're all the way out here, and it's one of those rare calm days. And I was like, that thing's not going to hold. That thing's the size of a lid of a cardboard box, man. We get over there, had mahi all over it. It was like, golly. I mean, it was just lit up like neon lights under there. It looked like a neon Christmas tree. Get the pitch bait. Anyway. We'll stop because we go on for hours. But man, thank you so much for joining. Again, look up A-Team and Captain Bobby. We'll put his information in the description along with some of these blanks and everything else. You got any questions, feel free to reach out and we'll get connected and get you some answers. But man, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for having me on.
Or thank you so much for joining me.
Well,
lunch and the podcast.
Yeah, man.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anytime you'll come on and talk to me, I'll buy you lunch.
All right, you got a deal.
Right. Well, man, thanks so much for joining us, and remember to like and subscribe and download wherever you get your podcast content. We'll see you next time.